Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. This is a Ukraine war live stream military aid update. I'm going to be talking about all sorts of things concerning aid to Ukraine, military equipment, things tangentially connected to Ukraine. I'm going to be talking about a little bit of what's going on right now. Actually, we'll start with that. I say start with that. I am going to, first of all, just say thank you for being here. It is in UK time, late on a Saturday night, right? I live in this weird universe where I'm the legend of the multiverse, so that's a weird thing. Two, if you know, you know. Two, what are you doing late on a Saturday night listening to me talk about military aid to Ukraine, or early on a Sunday morning if you're in Australia or New Zealand, or Saturday afternoon US time? So that's weird that you guys are interested enough for this, and thank you for being here. And also, I've shared a bottle of Ukrainian sparkling wine with my partner as and I remember on a Saturday night, I do that for Ukraine. It is supporting Ukraine. My enjoyment is supporting Ukraine. So there is that. And I was watching just started the second season of Paradise. And sorry for those who have tuned in to listen to military aid news about Ukraine. It will come, don't worry. This is just waiting for people to join the video, and I'm going to divulge, whether you like it or not, some of my personal life here. So I was watching the second series of Paradise, which is a Disney Plus series. First season was good, really enjoyed it. Second season, really enjoyed the first two episodes, absolutely brilliant. And I was today years old when I discovered that the United States of America, a place that I thought was so fundamentally different to the UK, actually had salt and vinegar Pringles, right? And I always thought salt and vinegar was a flavor that the UK kind of owned. It was our thing because of fish and chips, right? Just thought the US doesn't have salt and vinegar. They have their own crazy flavors, but we own salt and vinegar. And then on the first episode of Paradise, season 2, salt and vinegar Pringles came into it. And I was like, no. So I Googled it, and it's been a thing in the US since the 1970s. And I just assumed, never assume it makes an ass out of you and me, right? So I assumed the US wouldn't have had salt and vinegar Pringles. And so they do. So I've learned something, a really valuable lesson today. And that's a great bit of knowledge that I've gained from watching Paradise. Anyway, so that's good. What else can I tell you? Okay, second thing, personal thing, but Sunday, tomorrow, my time, basically my kid Finn, well, I've got twin boys, 15. If you watched my short today, you would have seen a bit of Finn in the back of the car on the way to football. He plays football on a Saturday, used to play rugby on a Sunday, gave up rugby, and I almost disowned him for that. But okay, we'll let that go. It still hurts. He's going to be trying out for a Sunday team tomorrow. They really want him to play for them. He's a really bloody useful player. And so that is a team in the midst of Portsmouth. And that takes quite a bit of time to get to, and matches and all that, if it all goes. Anyway, he's playing a friendly tomorrow. So tomorrow's output will be adjusted accordingly due to the fact that one of my boys is playing even more sports than he previously was. Okay, that's all the personal stuff out of the way. Thank you for being here. So this is it. Oh my God. Right, Kevin Devane. Right, thank you, my Irish friend. So Kevin, in my research into salt and vinegar crisps, right, turns out that Ireland's Tato company, which he references here, it was a company that developed salt and vinegar. That's what I learned as well today. Today is every day's a school day. Every day's a school day. And this Saturday, Kevin, was a particular schooly day, and I enjoyed learning about the crisp flavoring. Anywho, we developed it in the UK in, was it Smith's Crisps in 1967 on the back of Tato, I think maybe in the 50s in Ireland, and then sort of really hit the UK with Smith's Crisps. There you go. Bit of crisp flavor knowledge. And yes, in the United States, they call them chips, but as we know, they're just wrong. So we are now going to start the video proper. That was all kind of like, hello, guys. Introduction. Thank you to Mark from Little Whiskey Shop, probably not listening because it's a Saturday night and he's with his family. Thank you for the white port of yours that I am delectably enjoying. We are going to go, well, first of all, I've been banging on for 5 minutes already. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share. If you don't do this, Benny Pie, who helps out with the channel, will honestly, he'll crucify me or something. So please, like, if you ever want any more videos out of me, I need to survive past next week, and Benny Pie will kill me if you don't subscribe to the channel. So I'm not threatening you. I'm just saying it really helps if you do. So thank you. Let's get into the details. Enough waffling on. Right. Drone bomber maps are out already, and this signifies that Ukraine is heavily attacking. There are talks of, say, 150 drones being active, but also you'll see, I think the purple ones here are cruise missiles. The blue ones are jet drones, maybe, if I remember correctly. I'm not sure. Anyway, there's a place called Aramvir. Am I correct in saying that? The Armavir linear production and dispatching station that appears to be somewhat on fire at the moment. That has been struck. That's down in Krasnodar. So things are happening now as we go through the military aid news. I will try and keep you updated on that. Okay, before we launch into the aid, I just want to talk a little bit about this. If Fox News ever does a corrections, this is it. So just to give you the context for this, Fox News the other day did a segment on how the US is developing or utilizing really good AI drone interception, right? Which I'm not sure that they are particularly at the moment. They've asked Ukraine to help. Anyway, on Fox News, they basically showed this footage of a Wild Hornets video, Wild Hornet Sting interceptor taking out Shahed drones. Just one of the sorts of videos I show you on a daily basis. Anyway, Wild Hornets called out Fox News on this, and it looks like this is the correction that Fox News is giving, with Jesse Waters here, who is someone whom I despise. Like, this human being here, not a fan. I am not a fan of Jesse Waters. Here, I'm not quite sure what to make of this, but it sounds like he's going over the top on how Ukraine is kind of helping, or how good Ukraine is. But anyway, this is a correction, so let's listen to it.
Ukraine's got our back. They've pioneered the most advanced anti-drone tech, dealing with the swarms of Iranian drones since Putin invaded. Zelensky says he wants to help. Maybe offer us these Wild Hornets. The Ukrainians built these beautiful, low-cost, fast, agile kamikaze drones. Ukraine's got our back.
So there you go. That's just 20 seconds of Jesse Waters giving it some serious, bigging up the Ukrainians there. And that's not something I thought I would see. Anyway, I'm going to take off the audio there, and I'm going to reshare stuff without audio, because most of this stuff will not have audio. And it's much easier for me to do it in a different way, so I don't forget and show you things, move pages and you not move pages here for you. You don't know what I'm talking about. So, okay, let's continue that thought process with regard to Ukraine giving the Middle East some assistance. Zelensky has said, I thank every leader, every country that remembers the Pearl program. Pearl program, of course, is the one that gets equipment expedited from the United States to Ukraine, but you have to buy it off the US. The program that allows us to buy American missiles for air defense, for the Patriots. We all understand the risks of strikes from Iran and the need for missiles for air defense in the Middle East as well. Moreover, we see information about Russian assistance to the Iranian regime. There are reports that the Russians are providing intelligence to the regime in Iran to adjust strikes on Americans. Interesting that your man, if I can get back to here, Trump has actually given another comment on this. I did a video earlier concerning what Caroline Leavitt and Trump and Hegseth had said regarding intelligence being given by the Russians to the Iranians, and he dismissed it as not being important. Caroline Leavitt said it didn't really matter. And now we have Trump here saying the Russians would still be involving themselves in a conflict they are not a part of. Wouldn't Trump replies, wouldn't they say that we do it against them? They can give all the information they want, but the people are overwhelmed. We have the greatest military on earth. Do you think the map of Iran looks the same after this is all done? I can't tell you. Probably not. Map of Iran, is he saying that other people are going to be controlling parts of Iran that otherwise wouldn't have done? I think probably not. So he thinks literally there will be other nations controlling parts of Iran. That's quite incredible. But it's this part on the supply of intelligence from the Russians to the Iranians to target American assets, where he's like, again, he's doubling down on the position that, hey, I don't give a damn because we are smashing the Iranians up that much that it doesn't really matter. Well, I don't know. I don't know that that's fair to say to the families of the Americans who have died, that may have died as a result of Russian intelligence going to the Iranians. Right, Anton Gerashenko here shares a video. I'm not going to play it to you, but this is it Kubilius? Yes, Andreas Kubilius. So he is the EU Commissioner for Defence and Space. He's a guy in the EU that is supporting Ukraine in defence matters. And he shows the audience here around, or the cameraman around his office in the EU, that is just littered with loads of awesome models of Ukrainian weaponry, etc., etc. He says here you can also see all the best products. Everything is Ukrainian. In the office of the EU Commissioner for Defence and Space, Andreas Kubilius, there are models of Ukrainian military equipment, FPV drones, Bagura C drones that you can see in the video as well. The long-range Lyuti drone, a 155mm artillery shell, and the Flamingo cruise missile. There's a very nice, that's a Lyuti there. It's a very nice silver Flamingo in this. I might have missed it already. But anyway, all from Ukraine there. There are also souvenirs such as a vase decorated with traditional Petrikivka painting made from an artillery shell. What I love about this is it gives you a sense that Ukraine is really, really important to him. You know, I always say concentrate on the little things. When you have someone that's in charge of defense for the EU, having an office like this with, yeah, there's your big silver flamingo, you know where his heart lies, right? Where his moral evaluations are going. And I think that is super, super important. I love that. I absolutely love it. Right. Going back to, though, the discussion of giving help to the Middle East and receiving Patriot interceptors potentially. Zelensky said Ukraine wants to quietly receive Patriot missiles from partner countries in exchange for interceptor drones, noting Middle East countries have fired 800 PAC-3 missiles in 3 days, more than Ukraine has had in its entire war. I have heard elsewhere that they've fired 700 this winter, so there are different claims to how many missiles that Ukraine has fired, but you get the point. Now, Ukrainian drone makers say they're ready to export interceptors to the US and Gulf states. Reuters reports Skyfall's P1 Sun costs about $1,000, down over 1,500 Shaheds in 4 months. The company said it can build 50,000 a month, and this is something I've talked about a lot, that there is this difference between what they do produce and what they can produce, and that difference is equated essentially to financial orders and money, basically. So they can produce that money, they aren't producing that money, but if foreign entities put the orders in and spend the money with them, then they can produce them. And it is not denying these drones for Ukrainians. Those drones would go to the Ukrainians if someone paid for them to go to the Ukrainians. So if, for example, the Middle East puts an order in for a couple of thousand a month, and that money can go towards providing more drones for the Ukrainians. So there is essentially a net gain for Ukraine here. It is not a zero-sum game where drones for the Middle East means fewer drones for the Ukrainians. Company can build 50,000 a month, and they are not doing that. Now, I would argue that they need to be charging the Middle East a factor of freaking 10 here, at least. You know, $1,000 drones for rich Middle Eastern petro states. Those $1,000 drones should be sold for at least $10,000. You know, at a time of need, the Middle Eastern states will be. I mean, goodness me, you can spend $10,000 on a drone that's been overpriced by a factor of 10, or you can buy a PAC-3 interceptor for $4.2 million. Choice is yours. So if I was Ukraine, I'd be charging loads for these. But interesting that they say that they can even fly them remotely from Ukraine. That is a bit of a new nugget of information there. Fascinating. Yeah, exactly, says this this commenter here. Relish this. They should sell them in batches to the highest bidder. Definitely. Ukraine is critically short PAC-3 missiles for air defense, but has the potential to independently produce anti-ballistic complexes, according to Fedorov. So I'm sure they're working very hard on anti-ballistic missile defense systems. We have heard rumors previously. Air defense, the MOD has implemented after action review system, and every time after a large-scale attack, teams analyze the data in detail. So last night there were 509 missiles and drones sent into Ukraine. They'll be analyzing all that data and reacting to it. As part of the reform, a small air defense command system has already been formed, Starlink. So we're going through different topics here. After the Russian terminals were disconnected, the number of streams from the Russians decreased by 11 times. Ukraine began to intercept radio broadcasts more often. Procurement in February, the army received the fewest FPV drones, so it was necessary to intervene quickly. The Ministry of Defense began to purchase based on data. Economic war, we hear that the Ministry of Defense is focusing on blocking the Russian shadow fleet and restricting oil refining. Going back to this idea, though, up here, oh no, not there, this one, the Starlink one. After the Russian terminals were disconnected, the number of streams from the Russians decreased by 11 times. So that's one big bit of news. So the Russians were less able to communicate. What I then presume happened is that the Russians then resorted to using radios like they originally did. But radios are famously very difficult, are very easy to intercept, right? And I presume this then means that now the Ukrainians are back to being able to intercept the Russian radio. So not only are they less able to communicate, but when they do communicate, it is more vulnerable to the Ukrainians listening in. And when the Ukrainians listen in, of course, then they get data and they take advantage of that. They hit Russian targets more meaningfully, so on and so forth. So there are more benefits to Starlink going down than just not being able to communicate on Starlink or not having drones that can't be jammed, that kind of thing. Now, to go back to Fedorov here, yeah, this is it. So radios can give away your position, says Mads here. You know, even if it is encrypted. So yeah, okay, we can't understand what's being said, but we can know where you are. Okay, Defense Minister Fedorov said Ukraine is discussing creating joint consortia with partners to speed up production of anti-ballistic missiles. He stated the country critically lacks PAC-3 missiles for defense against Russian ballistic threats and can also produce such weapons independently. So there might be something going on there. It would be great if they could produce their own kind of missiles that aren't the, I guess, Lockheed Martin PAC-3 interceptors, but they could be fired from Patriot launchers. So just making it a bit like getting, you know, I've got an Epson printer there, but I never buy bloody Epson cartridges because they're too freaking expensive. You go on eBay and you get your cheap cartridges for your inkjet printer. Jobs are good. And I want cheap anti-ballistic missiles for my expensive Patriot launcher type thing. Okay, now going on to just a general point here. Stefan Jensen says the insane growth of Europe's defense industry, as you can see from this graph here, including Ukraine's own, is probably the single most important factor that will bring Ukraine victory over Russia, and less urgently, but also hugely significant, massively reduce Europe's dependence on the United States. So the US stopped giving weapons to Ukraine a year ago, and yet Ukraine is taking territory from Russia, says Anne Applebaum. Well, that's going to be largely to do with an influx of weaponry coming from Europe and a lot of support, very close support from Europe in a whole heap of different ways. So at the moment, this is European defense spending, may increase to 800 billion euros in 2030, core defense spending of European NATO countries. So predicted to be rather a lot up here, just a really steep increase after basically the United States pulled out in November time of last year after Trump won the election, but actually it was already ticking up fairly significantly before that point, as the war in Ukraine produced the need to do so. Right, good to have Rob Cook in the live chat as well. I've done an interview with Rob, who has we talked about digital ID, but hopefully Rob and the team are going to be heading out to Ukraine at some point. We're still working. We have not got very far on working that out, but that is something that we want to do. And Scruffy Tales is in the zone. Always good to have him on board. Check out his excellent channel, Scruffy Tales, the War Zone, to get mapping as to what is going on the front lines. I used to do way more mapping. I don't have time anymore because I'm reporting on so many things, and it's just kind of me on my own generating all this stuff. And although I do have help with the team and whatnot, but yeah, Scruffy Zone is an absolutely fantastic source of mapping information, so check him out. Right, Zelensky told The Independent Ukraine received Storm Shadow from the UK, Scout from France. Right, this reminds me, this morning, sometimes the way I do my videos is when I'm on my phone, like right throughout the day, I'm adding sources to, essentially, it used to be somewhat different, but it's now a Word document that basically, when I then get on my laptop here, it's already loaded onto the Word document, so it syncs really quickly. So I get the Blue Sky or Twitter or news article link, and I put it there, and it comes up here. But then sometimes there's syncing issues, and I miss certain links. And this morning, I almost did another one after my hits and losses, because there's a really big bit of news that they'd use Storm Shadows and Scalps to strike, and I think it was an ammunition depot in Donetsk, and I didn't report it. And anyway, I'll include it tomorrow, but it kind of irritates me. But it's really good news that they are still receiving regularly, it seems, Storm Shadows from the UK, Scouts from France. And indeed, as we can see from using them yesterday, that they have, it appears, a regular amount of them. ATACMS from the US, I don't know what's going on with them, because they occasionally do use them, and I think they use them just again, possibly in that strike or another strike just in the last few days. Zelensky's told The Independent that Ukraine received Storm Shadow from the UK, Scout from France, and a limited number of ATACMS from the US. In another iteration of this, it was that they had received a limited number of ATACMS from the US, and it indicated they didn't still receive them. But I don't know, are they still receiving them? Because I've been watching, obviously, what's been going on in Iran, and it's been quite interesting to see the US using ATACMS from Bahrain into Iran. But they've also used, for the first time in war, prisms, which is a replacement for the ATACMS. And one of the arguments is that Ukraine was receiving ATACMS from the US because they were actually getting the manufacturing of prisms underway. So as they were getting prisms in, they could give ATACMS to Ukraine. But if they're going to war with Iran, I'd imagine the Americans might be saying, let's not give any more ATACMS to Ukraine, or even sell them to Ukraine, because we can use them all up ourselves. And as they're going somewhat obsolete, it's probably a fairly cheap way, but still an effective way of striking a whole bunch of places. I mean, the US has announced they've hit 3,000 targets in Iran over the last bunch of days. That's an outrageous number of things that they've blown up. But if I was the Americans and I didn't care for Ukraine, I would be saying, well, screw Ukraine, let's use all these ATACMS ourselves, because we are churning through an absolute bunch of ordnance here. So let's use the old stuff in the warehouse, because it's still effective enough to, and the Iranian air defense is probably not existent enough to be able to take them down. So let's just use up our ATACMS, and of course that will hurt Ukraine. So I don't know. I'd love to know what the situation is with Ukraine. Are they either buying or receiving ATACMS from the US still at all? Has the US switched that off? But anyway, the indication here is that they are receiving a limited number of ATACMS, but it might actually be completely something that's done and dusted. All strike capabilities, though, beyond the 500 to 1,000 kilometers have been developed by Ukraine itself. And that's where they're at the moment, developing their own long-range weapons so that no one can tell them whether they can use them or not, or indeed no one can tell them they can't be delivered those weapons because they're making them themselves. Now, we hear that, let's see what you guys are saying about ATACMS. ATACMS is out of date, then let Europe build them under license. That would be great. Well, let Ukraine build them under license. You know, it wouldn't be too much of an issue, surely, would it? But yes. Now, Italy is reportedly sending Sidam-25 anti-aircraft platforms to Ukraine, according to Nichikonku, citing the same source that previously revealed B-1 Centauro deliveries, which did happen, although I haven't seen them on lost lists recently or at all. So I wonder what's happened to those B-1 Centauros. These are these wheeled kind of like, are they wheeled light tank type things? The claim says enough systems are being sent to form 3 batteries. No official confirmation has been issued, though. So the Sidam-25, let's have a look at that. I don't know. We're going to do this live. I don't know anything about the Sidam-25. This looks like your old kind of Shilka. Okay. So these are old school, like looks older than the Gepard. That looks like it's based on an M113. Self-propelled anti-aircraft gun developed in Italy from the chassis, the American M113. Yeah, of course it is. Due to the choice of basic chassis, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, so that's going to be a fairly low value. I mean, that's going to be obsolete for the Italians. But, you know, if it's useful, I mean, it's one of the tension you have, and we talked about this right at the beginning of the war, if you were with me then. The idea that everyone's trying to give Ukraine all their old crap that they don't want was really useful for Ukraine, of course, when they were completely desperate. But at this point now in the war, you're like, yeah, I mean, that's kind of useful, but actually, you know, we'd probably be better off having more interceptor drone teams and probably be better off having like Skynets if you can, thanks, or you know, absent of that, maybe Gepards. But I don't know. Maybe it will be useful. The Ukrainians will be the best judge of that. And the problem is, whenever you get these pieces of kit, you have to train your you have to train your crews to operate them. Obviously you're going to need the radars to acquire the targets and whatnot, and then you're going to need the spare parts and the maintenance the maintenance logistics chain to be able to keep these up and running. So it sounds really great to be given a load of stuff like this, but sometimes it's a bit more of a headache than it is a benefit. But I don't know. We'll see. Right, as some of you have already said in the live stream, this is an issue. According to VRT, although Belgium promised Ukraine around 30 F-16 fighters 2 years ago, 2024 this was, and they said there were to be some delivered by the end of 2024, it hasn't happened. None have yet been delivered from Belgium. Quote, by the end of the year, said Prime Minister in 2024, by the end of the year, our country will deliver 4 F-16s to Ukraine. And they haven't, and that was 2 years ago, and they didn't deliver any. So these were to be the first of the 30 F-16s promised, but 2 years have passed since the promise was made, and Ukraine has still not received a single Belgian fighter. The main reason why Ukraine has not received any Belgian F-16s seems to be the delay in the delivery of the new F-35s to Belgium. So Belgium won't give these until they get the replacement for them, because obviously it leaves them with a capability gap. Since this replacement is taking place somewhat later than planned, the transfer to Ukraine is also being delayed. According to another source close to the matter, there is indeed a delay of several months, well, several years, I'd say, in the delivery. Quote, but this is mainly because Belgium decided to spread the payments. So rather than being a delay on F-35s, the claim is that it's Belgium's kind of payment structure. We have heard from, who's the manufacturer of F-35s? Is it Lockheed Martin? That they are making them at a tremendous rate at the moment. They're actually, is it something like one every 1.75 days? Something that they are kicking out a lot of F-35s. But anyway, Belgium, I guess, haven't received theirs yet. Okay. Very good. I see what you've done there. Belgium waffling. Very, very good, Paul. Give yourself a clap on the back. Very clever. Jeff 2146, President of Ukraine, Volodymyr. In fact, I'm going to toast that, Paul. Thank you. Thank you for good gags. Even if it is even if you're ridiculing Belgians' desire for waffles. President of Ukraine, Zelensky, in case you didn't know, stated that Ukraine is preparing to make advance payments on the procurement of Gripen and Rafale multi-role fighter jets. Wow. So they're obviously very serious about getting these bits of kit that they're putting together advance payments for them. But I think, as this guy says, personally, I believe these payments are coming directly from the 90 billion euro loan that is expected to have its first tranche handed to Ukraine in April. However, of course, our good friend Viktor Orban has something to say about that 90 billion spondulis. So, yeah, Steve McGowan has pointed out that, yep, they may be making a lot of these F-35s, but some of them are being delivered with no radar systems, which are years behind. Yes, there is that issue. They put not dumbbells, what they're called, is it barbell? The weights for bloody weightlifting. They put them in the front cone of the F-35s to give them the weight of the radar as they're waiting for the radars to come. Okay, moving on. Looks like I need to sort out my my sources here. That I've got so many tabs open. I need to kind of refresh them. They sometimes go to sleep, as probably many of you have done already. Listen to me talk about F-35s and not being able to find out the word for weights. Anyway, right, we're back to it here. That was enough filler. Zelensky said Ukraine expects to receive Gripens and Rafales and warned it that if one person in the EU continues blocking the 90 billion euro package, he will give that person's address to Ukrainian soldiers to contact him in their own language. This was a controversy that has sparked Hungary, including Peter Magyar, who is otherwise very supportive of Ukraine, to go and excoriate Zelensky. And indeed, the EU has come out and likewise rebuked Zelensky for that, saying you can't threaten Hungarian leaders. Of course, one can assume this is a joke, but I don't think it's gone down too well. And I think it was somewhat a bad choice of things to say. And I think it's backfired quite significantly on Ukraine, unfortunately. Right. We have France planning new deliveries of AASM hammer bombs to Ukraine, according to French Ministry of Defense, says Max 25. I thought they were receiving these regularly anyway, but obviously the schedule for them had maybe come to an end, and they have renewed deliveries of these to the Ukrainians. They were making, well, it was originally, what was it, 50 a month they were giving to Ukraine to the tune of 600. The original delivery of these was 50 a month. We're going to give you 600. There you go. That is 12 months worth of 50 a month. And then they renewed that, but they upscaled it. And I don't know to how many, but they are definitely building more of these than they previously were, and they're getting more of these to Ukraine than 50 a month. The problem is Russia is using guided glide bombs to the tune of maybe 100 a day on average. So 50 a month for AASM. They're not receiving any more GBU variants from the Americans. How many guided glide bombs are they getting? Because these should be one of the primary weapons that I think the Ukrainians should be using. The Russians had their success on the front line largely due to guided glide bombs. These are too expensive. The French ones are too expensive. Ukraine needs to be manufacturing cheap-ass guided glide bombs to bomb the crap out the Russians on the front line. Yes, use your FPV drones and drone bombers, but you also need to thoroughly take out positions, buildings, trench lines, and you can only really do that with the kind of payload that you get from these sorts of weapons. Okay, now we move on to, well, we're going to stay on France. Actually, we've got quite a few bits on France, to be honest. We're going to go to jets. Now, we understand that by the end of this month, I believe, they're going to get another Mirage 2005F, and then very soon thereafter, another one. It's only two. And French aid to Ukraine said the other day that according to French armed forces, the French Air Force is currently training 3 Ukrainian fighter pilots on the Mirage 2000 fighter jet. Now, I would love to know, anyone, because you guys are so awesome, you're so clever and knowledgeable, if anyone is a bit of an expert in aviation, can you tell me how many pilots you think you will need per plane in the Ukrainian Air Force? I guess you'd look at our own air forces, right? So say, you know, you're a former RAF tech or fighter pilot or whatever. How many pilots did you have per plane? Did you rotate pilots on the same plane, or do pilots have their own plane and a plane only goes out with that pilot? So when it comes to training 3 pilots for Mirages, how many planes will that be for? They were given 3 originally. One then crashed due to a maintenance issue. So they've got 2 left. They're getting another 2 imminently. That'll be 4. I'd love France to give all their Mirage 2000s, they're slightly older planes now, and get some others. I think some Middle Eastern countries still operate these. Just by hook or by crook, get as many as you can. But it does surprise me that they're only currently training 3 pilots, which I think isn't great. Oh, I used to work on Gripens. Do you know an answer to that quiz? And yeah, Michelle, it is a quiz, but it's a quiz that I don't know the answers to. So there you go. It is indeed, maybe even a riddle. Who knows? So if you have this, please let me know. Oh, Paul Sweeney says pilots generally have their own plane with their name, call sign, decal under the window. This is what I was wondering as well. I was wondering exactly that, because I'd imagine they have their own plane for that exact reason, but I didn't want to just say that in case I was completely wrong. Steve McGowan, on the other hand, says usually 2 pilots and 20 mechanics per fighter. Interesting. Someone else says 1 per jet. So I guess it probably depends what the plane is and what the Air Force is. These things will change. So on average for the RAF, I love this. Just experts coming in, 1.5 to 2 pilots per aircraft in the RAF average. Is that 1.5? Is that like some of them like can't use their legs in a wheelchair? Like one, how does that work? I know how averages work. Right. Interesting. Thank you, guys. Okay, so it still doesn't particularly answer because it's probably quite variable. So maybe that gives you another 1 to 3 planes from those stats, but really I'd hope they're training more pilots on Mirages than that. Right. According to French armed forces, France has trained more than 20,000 Ukrainian soldiers, the equivalent of a French army division, and that's been done in France and Poland. We also understand that, according to French armed forces, France has recently transferred a new batch of VAB armored personnel carriers to Ukraine. These are obsolete now armored personnel carriers from the French armed forces. They are being replaced, and France has given first dibs to the Ukrainians on anything they get rid of that are then they're getting rid of stuff because, you know, as all armed forces do, they're replacing bits of kit, but they have given Ukraine the first dibs on anything they get rid of. So if Ukraine wants them, they can get them from France, and VABs have gone to France already in fairly decent numbers, and evidently they are providing Ukraine with more as they get rid of them. Good news there. Now, British and French paratroopers have made their final preparations before a possible peacekeeping mission to Ukraine, according to the Daily Telegraph. More than 600 soldiers from the UK's 16th Air Assault Brigade carried out a mock airborne raid with comrades from the 11th Brigade Parachutiste in France. So good news that they are working on, you know, being able to assist Ukraine after one presumes peace negotiations are finalized. The drill in Brittany took place at the 4th anniversary of the war in Ukraine, and is a final exercise preparing paratroopers to deploy anywhere in the globe with NATO, but with an eye on Ukraine there. Oh, good old Douglas Bader. Yeah, very good reference there. Thank you, Paul. The Pentagon data has, if you don't know who Douglas Bader is, go and Google him. Pentagon data indicates that the United States had transferred at least 900 M113 armored personnel carriers to Ukraine as of January 2025. And we've already mentioned the M113 as being the basis of the Saddam 25 air defense piece of kit. So these are the old classics, you see them in Vietnam and whatnot, classic armored personnel carriers from the Americans, but actually loads of nations have used these throughout the last sort of 50 years. And indeed, while the US may have provided 900, there's probably been an awful lot more M113s from other nations as well. So, a lot more than 900. Now, good news, this is on my thumbnail. This is good news, but also pretty controversial. So the good news bit is the UK has revealed for the first time its maintenance, repair, and overhaul facilities in Ukraine. So some footage has come out. I think Luke Pollard, the minister, has been talking about this. Largest ever UK-led international trade mission with the record 35 British firms. Currently, there are 4 such facilities in the country, with the 5th beginning to be operational in the near future. Excellent news. UK really come out with the goods, helping the Ukrainians fix up British provided equipment, but I presume not just British stuff, maybe NATO stuff, maybe, I don't know, the scope of the repairs might be even greater, and I'd hope so. This is really good news. In a way, I often, to try and be proud of the British help to Ukraine, I often focus on what the UK is doing, and they often do things behind the scenes and are very much at the forefront of helping Ukraine, organizing a lot of stuff, and really, doing a lot of legwork in trying to get aid to Ukraine, right? So that's great stuff. However, as Christopher Miller from the Financial Times says, after saying the UK Defence Ministry reveals its Ukraine-based repair centres where UK engineers work alongside Ukrainian colleagues. So you've got British engineers out there around the clock to get battle-damaged armoured vehicles back to the front line faster. However, in doing this, when you've got Luke Pollard being out there and saying, look, this is what we're doing, with pictures, although it's quite difficult to geolocate this from inside, people criticize this happening and saying, be careful what you're showing, because there are real vulnerabilities for the Ukrainians when you show footage like this. You've got a real risk of this being geolocatable. So then they took it down. Nothing to see here. Seems Defence HQ realised its big video reveal showing British engineers at a workshop repairing vehicles inside Ukraine was quite a flub. It revealed identifiable features and featured Luke Pollard going so far as to describe the surrounding, making it likely to be geolocated and targeted by Russia. The post has been taken down, but the damage is done. The internet never forgets. I don't know if he said, maybe there was a video attached to that where he said things that he probably shouldn't have said. But yeah, I really hope that doesn't reveal any locations for the Ukraine, for the Russians to be able to hit. Yeah, OPSEC, major dum-dum move indeed. Hopefully it isn't too easy for the Russians to take advantage of that. Now, remaining on Britain and Ukraine momentarily, the Ukrainian British company Tripilian has developed a new unmanned platform called Atom, designed by veteran specialists based on experience from ongoing combat operations. The Atom drone can be configured in both reconnaissance and strike versions. It has a maximum operational range of 50 kilometers and can remain airborne for up to 4 hours. Additional specs have not yet been disclosed. So again, another development there from the Brits. Yeah, it looks fairly similar to the MQ-9 Reaper, but that's what you do. Yeah, hopefully they can utilize those going forward. Then we hear that Portugal's drone exports, I've reported a couple of times. Right, I see. So someone's giving us a little bit of further details here. In the video, you could judge the length of the building. I guess that's a thing, isn't it? So, you look for the dimensions of the building. You can use I guess, landmarks in the building or whatever, benchmarks in the building. Say, right, that building is however many meters by however many meters. It's got this kind of glass on the inside. And then you just go and look at Google, you look at your satellite imagery, and even if it takes you a week to find that place, and maybe you set AI up with the parameters and the AI goes and looks at the imagery, you can find out where it is. What kind of windows? I'm sure the Ruskies could narrow it down to a few possible locations. Yeah, that is a bit of an issue. What an absolute shame. That's a disaster. I talked about Portugal having been a nation. We don't talk about Portugal all that much with regard to assistance to Ukraine, but they have produced some drones that I've reported on previously. Sporadically mentioned Portugal. Now, their exports to Ukraine have surged from 4.3 million in 2022 to 87.3 million in 2025. Now, twice the value of all drones ever sold to Russia. Before the war, Portuguese drones sales to Ukraine were 5 to 10 times lower than to Russia. Today, Ukraine outpaces Russia by a widening margin. The realignment has not only increased Portuguese defense revenues, but also strengthened bilateral industrial ties, including a December 2025 deal to jointly produce underwater drones, potentially expanding exportable tech output. Also, this reflects a shift from negligible exports. Ukraine was 75th export market in 2019 for Portugal to 36th by 2025, while Russia slipped from 34th to 50th among Portugal's trading partners. Well, I personally think that they should tell Russia to go take a long walk off a short pier and not export anything to them and just get all of that stuff to Ukraine. US has so we're going to now go to the US. Actually, that's I got the M113 US one in the wrong place there. But anyway, we're going back to the US. The analyst reports that the US admits chronic ammunition production failure. Last week, Congress heard from the man responsible for US 155mm production. Those are artillery shells, NATO artillery shells. The principal plant is now at full production in the ancient foundry at Scranton, Pennsylvania, making 56,000 shells per month, up from the 8,000 it was producing in 2022. That's its maximum. The US established a new state-of-the-art 155mm factory at Mesquite in Texas, operated by General Dynamics Land Services. A 3-line factory can produce 100,000 per month, with one exception. It's not yet produced a single shell. The mismanagement of the company and its disinclination to complete the project was one the Pentagon official described as beyond belief, a series of excuses, incompetence, and obstruction that he could not understand or find reason for, and which the company says isn't true while offering no explanation. At least now we know that the US isn't supplying its paid-for contracts to PURL, to Pearl. I don't know enough detail about this. I need to look into this, but assuming what the analyst says is true, there's obviously some funny business going on with General Dynamics and the production of shells that ostensibly would be very useful for Ukraine to get hold of. Is it to do with unionization? I don't know. I wonder. Right. Then Malcontent News reports that clearly this is all Ukraine's fault, tongue-in-cheek there. Considering the hundreds of Tomahawks, dozens of Tomahawks, handful of Tomahawks. Wait, what's that? Ukraine didn't get any Tomahawks, but it's still Zelensky's fault? Got it. Okay, this is the idea that Caroline Levitt blamed Ukraine for taking all these high-end, and indeed, not just Caroline Levitt, Trump initially blamed Ukraine for the US's lack of the high-end missiles or weaponry that they can't now use, they don't have enough of to use against Iran. Blamed Ukraine for having that, but Ukraine didn't receive the high-end weaponry other than maybe Patriot PAC-3 missiles, which are now buying off the United States. US weapons stockpiles, particularly cruise missiles, are being depleted amid the conflict with Iran, according to Reuters. In the past 3 days, roughly 400 Tomahawk missiles have been expended, equivalent to about 5 years of supply. Pentagon is preparing a roughly $50 billion supplemental budget request to replenish inventories and expand production of key weapons such as Tomahawk missiles. Of course, this again makes us understand that the US really wasn't very prepared for the war against Iran. They didn't, I can't believe they didn't foresee that the price of oil and gas would go up. And they're like now going, really? Oh my goodness, we need to react to this and unsanction all of the Russian oil that's sitting around in the sea. Oh, thanks. Putin's going to love that. Who cares? We're aligned with him anyway, says Trump. And then blaming Zelensky for their lack of weaponry is just, I think, an excuse. Poor forethought, poor organization. As my dad used to say, piss poor planning prevents, prior planning prevents poor performance. Prior planning prevents piss poor performance. That was it. All the P's. Russian military voices are increasingly complaining that Ukraine's German-made Helsing, and I did mention this the other day in my hits and losses video, trying to work out what's going on here, because we had the complaints from the Ukrainians that the Helsing HX2 was having real trouble with its launching. They're not going to put any more orders in for them. You know, it's not going well enough. And these are supposedly really quite reasonably priced German drones that have AI capabilities as well. And they were hotly anticipated to be this really good product for the Ukrainians. And then we heard that actually they're not putting an order in because there are issues with them. But then we've heard that the Russian military voices are increasingly complaining that Ukraine's German-made Helsing HX2 loitering munitions are appearing in areas once treated as safe rear zones. Those areas host logistics depots, command routines, and air defense reload points that sustain a long war. Strikes deep behind the line create more than physical damage. They force Russia to disperse assets, move command posts, and pull air defenses away from the front. The geometry of the war expands and the cost of defense rises. A German-linked system also adds a political layer. Moscow can frame this as the West reaching deeper into Russian territory, opening space for harsher retaliation or broader mobilization. If the trend continues, Russia faces a harder trade-off: harden the rear at high cost, or accept that deep assets will be hunted routinely with cumulative effects of the front on the front. Now, the big question here is, was there a cheap fix for the HX2? Was it a software thing? Just tinker a little bit. Right now, it's working fine. Or are the Russians complaining about the ones that did get through? So let's say there are issues with launching, and 2 out of 5 fail, and that's not good enough. But the 3 that don't fail in their launch go on and blow up Russian stuff, and Russians are saying, "Hey, don't like these drones; they're blowing up our stuff." So I don't know. I don't know what the reality is there. As I've said many times before, German aid to Ukraine here, pointing out yet again that the Germans are doing things outside of the main central government. This is the case with many countries as well. There's a selection bias from me in having German aid to Ukraine talk about this more often, but this happens in France, it happens in the UK. But anyway, local police force in the Germany, I don't know though, it does seem like Germany might have more local government areas doing this. Local police force in German city of Bonn is donating 2 urgently needed Ford S-Max police vehicles to its Ukrainian twin city of Kherson. The vehicles were handed over at the end of February and will be delivered to the new workplace in Ukraine shortly. So that's all good news. Hopefully that is happening lots more as well. Yeah, they've Germany have given loads of vehicles over time. There have been loads of VWs delivered to different entities within Ukraine, for sure. Okay, the Netherlands will attract additional resources to scale up the Ukrainian Project Drone Line to destroy the occupiers. According to Militiani, more than 1,000 crews are working within the project, and in January to February, they destroyed every 3rd Russian serviceman at the front. So that's a drone line being supported there by the Netherlands more. I need to look into the details of that, though, to see exactly what the Netherlands are doing and how that turns out. Anton Gerashenko talks about how EU countries are absorbing Ukraine's military knowledge to strengthen their own defense. This is something I've talked about ad infinitum. Here are a few examples. In 2022, Quantum Systems, to rewind, the idea that we should support Ukraine isn't just a moral political one. It's also a military future-proofing one. If we want our militaries to be the best they can possibly be, prepared for any kind of war scenario that might pop up, then we need to be learning from the Ukrainians. Helping out the Ukrainians, being part of that feedback loop, improves our own defenses. So the idea that the US keeps boasting, or Trump keeps boasting about, hey, we're not giving anything away to the Ukrainians anymore. We're selling stuff to nations who do help Ukraine. Well, hopefully Ukraine is stopping the US being part of that feedback loop. Look, if you're not going to help us, we're not going to help you. And actually giving stuff to Ukraine can be very beneficial for the nations who are involved. Examples here: in 2022, Quantum Systems supplied Ukraine with vector drones. At the time, they successfully destroyed Russian equipment. But within months, Russian electronic warfare systems learned to neutralize them. It became clear that simply sending equipment to the battlefield was not enough. The war had become a testing ground for modernization. To keep the products effective, engineers had to work side by side with the military. This led to the idea of a joint venture. Recently, a drone assembly plant called Linzer opened near Munich. München. Ukrainian engineers install anti-drone modules and AI navigation systems into the drones, while the German side provides production capacity and financing. In the first phase, the plant plans to produce 10,000 Linzer drones annually. In the summer of 2025, another example, Firepoint, maker of Ukrainian missiles and drones, established a facility in the southern Jutland region to produce rocket fuel, according to the Danish government. This cooperation is beneficial for Europe. Speed. Modern warfare evolves very quickly. Ukrainian battlefield experience allows one to develop weapons needed for today, not years ago. The economy. The factories open, creating workplaces. This year, the German government allocated over 11 billion euros to Ukraine's air defense sector, with 2 billion earmarked for joint production with Ukraine. By the end of the year, 9 more plants are expected to open. Security. Ukraine knows how to defend from Russian weapons and sabotage activities. We, quote, we must learn quickly from Ukraine. They are the world's largest testing range for new weapons systems, and they are innovating incredibly fast, Germany's economy minister Katharina Reiche said. For Ukraine, this model means more weapons for the front lines through allies and less vulnerability for our production facilities. Ukrainian production facilities. For Europe, it's an opportunity to close the technological gap and strengthen its own security. By investing in Ukrainian expertise, European countries are effectively investing in their own defense. Another thing to note, and I talked about this on a back channel earlier with the team. There's been a lot of talk in the UK over the last few days about the strike on Akrotiri RAF base in Cyprus, this island in the Mediterranean, where we've got an RAF base, and it was hit by this drone. We originally thought it was an Iranian drone. Now, we understand it wasn't from Iran, but there's no clarity on who sent it. Was it Hezbollah from Lebanon? Was it, whoever else? Okay. There was all this political fallout where the Conservatives and Reform started going, this is crazy. Why, we should be helping out the US completely with their strikes on Iran, but also we need to get why. And then what happened is, like, the Greeks sent out a ship, and then the Italians sent out ships, and then the French are sending out a carrier group, which is actually loads of nations in that French carrier group. And our opposition party was like, what are we doing? How come they're getting ships there? How come they've got ships there already? My comeback to that was because they are countries in the Mediterranean, and we're up here in the north. And if we want a ship, actually, it's going to take quite a long time to get there. And a Greek ship can just go across to Cyprus like that. And the Italians are a lot closer, and the French are a lot closer. Like Toulon is a lot closer. Anyway, there's that side of things. But also, we weren't really very thoughtful. We should have our ships out there. Now, our air defense in the UK is mainly ship based, right? So in order to protect Akrotiri, we need to get out. So we're sending out HMS Dragon. It's going to take a week to get there. By that time, war's probably going to be over or whatever. You're thinking, is that just performative? And everyone's like arguing about how quickly we can get a naval ship there. And oh my goodness, our naval ships aren't prepared enough because they're in docks getting fixed up because there are issues, and it's been massive underfunding. And then you've got people like blaming Keir Starmer for us not having enough warships. He's been in charge for like 14 months or whatever. The Navy's been underfunded for like 20 years. Like, shut up. Anyway, all this argument is the wrong argument. The argument should be, Why the frick have we not sorted ourselves out after watching this war for 4 years and not got low-cost air defenses against drones on every single RAF base in the world? Like, how can any country looking at the war in Ukraine not think, holy crap, we need to have interceptor drones or Gepard equivalents or, Skynexes or whatever sitting on every single airbase in the world, whatever country you're at? Like, stop talking about how quickly you can get a ship out to Cyprus and start thinking about why the frick can't we shoot down, or why can't we acquire a drone as a target and shoot it down with something on the base? We don't need to have a ship like pissing about around the Mediterranean to try and sort that out. That's the wrong argument. Anyway, there's a little bit of a bugbear of mine. Yeah, actually 20 years at least. So what's happened ever since the Falklands, if you look at our funding in the UK for the armed forces, like the idea that you can blame like the current government for the state of our armed forces is actually ridiculous. And by the way, we are shipbuilding loads more than I think we have been previously. I think actually what the government has done is really cause an uptick in naval shipbuilding in the UK. So it's almost like it's not just wrong, it's very wrong. Anyway, I need to look at the details about that. But actually, it's still the wrong argument. It's like we need to learn that this is all about drones, and it's all about counter-drone, low-tech, low-cost counter-drone technology and production. And we just need to be doing it. So anyway, to continue, a bit more generally, not these next few aren't necessarily to do with Ukraine, but they are as well. SAMP-T-NG, the next generation SAMP-T made by Eurosam, is the equivalent, is an alternative for the Patriot PAC-3. The Israelis use the Arrow system, don't they? Is it Arrow 2? I don't know. Anyway, SAMP-T is SAMP-T-NG should be one of the world's leading anti-ballistic missile air defense systems. If they've done a good job of developing this is a new version, next generation version. And again, this is a quote, and again, SAMP-T-NG is, I would say, available in the short run, clearly before 2030, 2028, 2029, where the Patriot system, if you want to buy one tomorrow, you'll have to wait much longer than the date of, I said, for the SAMP-T-NG. Now, of course, there are many other prospects typically in Europe, Eastern Europe, and in the Middle East as well. I don't want to mention any country in particular because they don't like us to disclose our discussions. So this is Thales Defense, I presume Eurosam, that makes this. But the idea is that they are saying we can get you SAMP-T-NG before, if you want to go and buy a Patriot PAC-3, you're going to be waiting a long time. We are hearing now that Switzerland isn't going to receive, they keep getting bumped down and down. They're not going to receive them for 5 years. So Switzerland might well be deciding to buy, so Switzerland have been bumped down. Sorry, I'm just looking at this. Yeah, maybe yes and no. So Penguin says ATPGEO, the rot started under Labour. They cut too deep in the peace dividend year and did not learn from. I was retired in 1996 while deployed in Bosnia. Tories cut even deeper though. Yeah, and actually, I think it may have even happened before that. So Labour came in 1997, and I'm sure I saw a graph that essentially, I'm sure someone can dig this out, but I'm sure it happened in the 80s, like after the Falklands. I might need to look into that, or maybe the early 90s. But I think, yeah, so it just went, and like, you understand why. Like, I do get this. I've talked about this previously, the idea that Europe gets slagged off for not spending enough on defense. But when you live in times of like long-term peace, then you see you've got a choice. Do we spend on, it's an insurance policy. Like, defense is an insurance policy. So you either say, so I can be critical of not spending enough on defense, but I also understand why it happened. Like, it's like, should I expect you do this at home? Like, we do this all the time. Like, shall I get the most expensive insurance policy on my car insurance? I do that if I'm expecting to crash, right? If I'm expecting to crash, I want to pay the smallest excess. Americans call it copay. I want to pay the smallest excess and get the best coverage and legal coverage and all this, right? Well, I would do that if I'm expecting to crash. but I'm not expecting to crash. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend as much on my insurance, as little on my insurance as I possibly can, whilst getting the basic coverage, like third-party fire and theft. If I don't have a lot of money, if I've got a little bit more money, so that means if I crash my car, I'm insured on damage to other people. And then fully comprehensive insurance is I'll also have my own car fixed up. And then the amount of excess I have to pay will be defined by how much I'm going to pay on my insurance. So if I'm going to whack my insurance payments up to like a max, I'm going to have zero excess and I'm going to have full coverage and I get legal cover and I'm going to get all this stuff, right? But the reality is we don't do that. And we don't do that because, hey, it's not going to happen to us. That's what happens with international defense expenditure is you go, well, we've had peace for 50 years in Europe. So I can either spend all this money on defense, like me, I can either spend all this money on car insurance, or I can spend a little bit more money on my holiday, or I can buy an extra bottle of wine or whatever, right? So Europe's gone like, well, we haven't been at war since World War II. It's all looking pretty good. Balkans were a bit of a problem, but NATO took care of that. So we're going to spend more on welfare because actually that's what is going to get us voted back in, right? Or whatever. And then what happens is you're like, oh, it's still not a war, spend less. 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 Oh my God, there's a war. Oh my God, our defense, our army and navy, our armed forces have been gutted. And you know, and then we blame the governments. Oh, you bastards, you cut back. Well, yeah, you wanted another hospital. You wanted better education. So when Labour got in 1997, it was education, education, education. Yeah, and that means probably spending less on defence. Everyone's like, yeah, education, brilliant. You need to be spending more on education. We're all very happy about that. The reality is you didn't spend enough on defence. We can say that now in hindsight, but at the time, actually you spent loads on education. And the problem is it's a zero-sum game. We only have a finite amount of money. You spend it more over here, you spend less over there. It's that simple. So where are your priorities? In times of peace, our priorities are not spending on the armed forces. So I understand that. It's really easy to criticize, I think. I'm not saying Ex-Penguin is. There's a very salient point there from Ex-Penguin. But we all do this, don't we? We criticize and say, oh, like now we're at war. We're all like pointing fingers at like decades of underspending. Yeah, we made the choice not to spend on defense. And at the time, and with what we knew, probably the right choice. But now we didn't know that Russia would invade Ukraine. Maybe 2014 should have been the sign, right? 2014, that should have been the time when we went, we need to spend a bit more on defense here because Russia's acting like a bunch of noodles. So actually, I think 2014 is probably your signpost there. I'm just spitballing here, but yeah, interesting. Alvin Archer says, I think the government currently has a good plan defense-wise using defense spending to boost the economy. This is what Germany's doing. It seems to be what the UK is doing. It seems to be what Canada is doing. Also, our defense review was fairly decent as well, like well written. The question is, can we afford to follow through on the defense review? That's a British problem, but I'm sure that's exactly the same problem for all European nations. Denmark has announced a historic order for the SAMP-T-NG air defense, turns out, batteries. We are also in discussions with Romania and Greece, says Catherine Vautrin, who I presume is she. We are rearming European defense industry there. I can't remember. I think she's a French government, isn't she? But anyway. Then we hear that France, Germany, and the UK will jointly work on developing long-range missiles. This is brilliant. We need to be getting together, pool our expertise, bring down costs, make really good stuff in Europe, also really cheap stuff in Europe. We need both. We need your high-end precision stuff, and we need your low-end, Flamingo FP5 missiles that use old engines and so on and so forth. We need a bit of everything. This war has shown us that you can't afford to use masses of very expensive weaponry. and kind of this is what I was referring to earlier. Here we've got the imagery. US CENTCOM announced the first ever combat use of precision strike missile, the PRISM ballistic missiles. This is the replacement for ATACMS. They're using them in Iran, but they're also using ATACMS, because why wouldn't you? You know, again, you need your cheap, not that ATACMS are cheap, but they're now obsolete, so they're effectively free. As in, you're not replacing them, ATACMS, you're not, you've already bought them, so they're effectively free. You use up your ATACMS, and then, you know, make sure you have a good stockpile of prisms. The missiles were launched from an M142 HIMARS launcher or launchers. That was in, I think, Bahrain. Anyway, there we go. Let's just go to a few comments from you guys before we go on to the next section. This is a pretty big one, but it's, hey, it is Saturday night and it's what you're here for. We have, thank you for Benny Pie, who's been in the background. Going back to the crisp discussion, which is probably the most important discussion, Paul Sweeney said there's a Tato theme park, if you weren't aware, JP. I wasn't aware. Every day is a school day. I have been educated. It's probably not. I went to Dublin for my missus's birthday last year. I took her to Dublin for a weekend, and the weekend was just a glorified pub crawl. And our culture of Dublin was going around Temple Bar and other places. Just we went on an open top bus tour around. Last morning that we were there, we quickly went around the Viking Museum, which was really cool. Went up some sort of steeple nearby and got some good views of Dublin. And we went in Dublin to this really cool museum. It's like Dublin's smallest museum, and it's just this one room. They're packed full of stuff that people in Dublin had given to population in Dublin had given to the museum, stuff over the course of history, all sorts of random stuff in there. And it was brilliant. Half an hour in this museum with a guy who's really funny, dressed up and talking about Dublin history over the centuries. I'm like, I've learned more about Dublin in half an hour that has remained with me, and it was a really enjoyable experience rather than going around a museum for like 4 hours. When I go around museums, I'm really geeky. I try and read everything, and as if I have to take everything in. And actually, just a half an hour in a room with a bunch of other people looking at like golden monster munches and stuff, the real random trinkets about concerning Dublin history. It was great. Anyway, I didn't go to the Tato theme park. Is where that was going. Paul Gouda, Deberitz, Norway's providing about 20% of the military support to Ukraine now. Only Germany does more. It's astounding what normally Norway is doing. Sweden, not too far behind, Denmark as well, but Germany providing an awful lot. Norway really turning up. Ola Nielsen talking about Denmark. Hi, is it true that the US U-boat didn't rescue the soldiers from the Iranian warship they hit with a torpedo? Yes. So, okay, this is not to do with this video, but let's just talk about this for a second. What happened is there was an Iranian warship that was involved in the Indian Ocean in exercises with, I think, Sri Lanka, Indian Navy, and so on and so forth. This Iranian warship was involved, and I think it was it unarmed as well. And then as it was leaving back to Iran, I presume, after the exercises, and this is not in the theater around Iran, an American submarine blew it up with that torpedo. I showed you the video of that. And then a Sri Lankan vessel rescued the survivors there. The submarine didn't. The submarine just scooted off. So there's a question there about whether that was, I don't know if you could call it a war crime, or certainly dubious in a humanitarian sense, because once they are stranded sailors at sea, they're no longer combatants. It's the same kind of idea that when the Americans showed that that video of blowing up the boat in the Caribbean with supposedly drug runners on, blowing up a boat, and then like an hour later there were two people on the underside of the boat. The boat was capsized, blown up, most of the people killed, these two survivors. They then sent another missile onto those two survivors. That is a war crime, arguably, because it's one of two things. It's either outright murder or it's murder as a war crime, because it wasn't actually war they're at. These were drug runners, there was no war on the drug runners. It's not like legally defined as a war. So anyway, either way, if it was war, then you have to adhere to the rules of war. And the rules of war say that if you are shipwrecked, you're no longer a combatant, and you are obliged to save shipwrecked sailors, right? So if it was war, these drug runners are now shipwrecked sailors. They're not combatants. They weren't anyway, and this is why it can't be defined as a war. And that they got blown up by another missile means that you've blown up shipwrecked non-combatant sailors, which is a war crime, or you've just murdered two people on the bottom of a boat, which is murder. So either way, the Americans, what they did there was pretty horrific. But with regard to this example, I don't know what the obligations are to save them. I don't know what the rules are, whether if you see them stranded, you're okay with buggering off and just leaving them to it. I don't know what the official rules are. Scruffy Tales, radios require batteries. They're talking about how the radios are being relied on more now that Starlink's down. Radios require batteries. Batteries are valuable as diamonds in the military, and terrain blocks signals. I mean, there are lots of issues why batteries are bad. I mean, with Starlink, it sends the signal upwards, and it's very difficult to jam. And then, radios, it's more, as he says, the terrain blocks. Scruffy's selling Gripens now, doing a great job at it. Is he? Good man. So Cheryl says, what happened to Ukraine's gold and money that Hungary stole? I haven't heard yet. There's no news on that. But honestly, that is a real concern, Cheryl. Scruffy again, the Ukraine war is a war in which the M113 outperformed everything built after it. They have used M113s really well. You've got the Dutch version of the M113 called the YPR 765, which is sometimes seen more as an infantry fighting vehicle. It's got like a small gun on top. It's not really. It's got marginally been upgraded, but they've used that quite effectively. But yeah, you see them being used as Kazavacs and in all sorts of different manners. The M113, they are still being used effectively. And it's just the armor on them obviously isn't great. Yeah. So Wimcolt here says, do you think that Ukraine is developing its own PAC-3 suitable for firing from the Patriot system? I don't know. The last I reported on this was that they were creating their own, I don't know, you can't call it Frankenstein, their own universal air defense system, whereby they're creating this launcher that can fire, I'm guessing here, but they can fire like AIM-9X and I don't know, whatever that's what the NASAMS fires, whatever so the AMRAAMs that are fired, I think, from UK's Raven system, and then maybe, for example, like a Patriot or one of the old Soviet missiles. The idea is that you can pack whatever missile onto it, maybe on a different like part of it, and you can fire those missiles. And so therefore you're not beholden to this idea that one system has one missile, and if you're short on missiles, then you can't use a system. And that's a real shortcoming. And actually, it's quite an obvious issue. I mean, how much more versatile is something that can fire multiple different rockets now, or missiles? Now, there might be negatives to this, but I think that sounds eminently sensible to me, especially for Ukraine, that's getting all these different missiles from all and equipment from all these different places to create something that can cope with the variety of the stuff they're getting. So I don't know if they are developing that, and I don't know what the legality of that is in terms of copyright or whatever. So, for example, the Patriot system might say a bit like when I buy compatible ink for the Epson, like technically can Epson come to, if they come to my house and they say you're not allowed to do that, I don't know if they can, if that is a thing, but can the manufacturers of the Patriot systems dictate that you can't have compatible missile with it? I don't know. Never thought I'd talk about my printer so much. Paul Campbell says, I thought the world cancelled F-35 orders. The problem is F-35s are still really decent plane and that's very good at doing X, Y, and Z. And if you need to do X, Y, and Z, and F-35 is still the best plane for doing X, Y, and Z, then you might want F-35. But other planes are much better at doing A, B, and C. So it depends what you need, what you want, how much they cost, and what you've contracted to buy. It's going to be very interesting to see what the Canadians do. We still don't have any more clarity, I don't think. Although Gripen, I think, are still talking about, having a manufacturing hub in Canada. There's talk that they are going to not buy all of the F-35s they were originally going to buy, but we haven't heard anything more about that. Scruffy, no radars, overheating engines, and software that needs to be rebooted mid-flight. There are issues with the US F-35. Imagine the ones exported. Yeah, there are maintenance issues, I think, with the F-35s. And like I said, horses for courses, positives and negatives. Some people are really like, yeah, Gripens are way better than the F-35s, and other people are like, F-35s are way better. So Thomas Tyner, if you've ever heard him talk about stuff on places like Twitter, he's like absolutely slams a Gripen every opportunity he can, says the F-35 is way better for everything than the Gripen. But then other people would be like, actually, if you look at the reliability of the Gripen versus the F-35 and look at this metric and that metric, it's not quite so black and white. Okay, just a few more of these and then I'm going to get back to it. So Orban can say FU out loud to Ukraine. The moment Ukraine returns the favor, it's a no-no. Impolite, yes, but what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Screw Orban. Yeah, this is the idea that Zelensky joked about, killing Orban. Yeah, it does seem to be one-sided, but I don't know that Orban's ever said something quite so. I mean, it's not menacing because I would take that as a joke, but yeah, I don't know. Difficult one. Usually, yeah. Okay, so anyway, right, let's get back to it. Just before we do, here's one from Da Vinci. The drone line project is a Ukrainian project of the target of 50,000 Russians killed per month. The Dutch support for the project was recently discussed during the visit of the Minister of Defense, Yezil Guz, as well as other aid staff. Thank you for a bit more information on that, Da Vinci, total legend. Right, okay. So we are now going on to talk very briefly about funding. There's not an awful lot of information on funding, but Japan is to provide Ukraine with 6.2 billion yen. Right. How much is 6.2 billion yen in US dollars? 39 million, so $40 million, basically $40 million in a grant aid within the framework of the previous phases of the emergency recovery program. The government of Japan allocated about $650 million. So okay, I don't know that equals that much, but anyway, help from Japan coming. IMF has approved a new 4-year $8.1 billion extended fund facility program for Ukraine. Around 1.5 billion will be dispersed in the first tranche to help cover the budget deficit and maintain macro financial stability. The program forms part of a wider 4-year financing framework. This is important because I presume this is the one that's contingent upon the 90 billion euros going. So I presume the IMF is happy that they will eventually get the 90 billion euros from the EU, but yeah, anyway. Right. I told you it's going to be a long one. Ukraine is doing an awful lot. So let's absolutely romp through this section. Ukraine plans to introduce fixed-term services for all military personnel, with Defense Minister Fedorov working on a contract of up to 5 years and a 1-year deferral after discharge. Deputy head of the presidential office said a final version of the legislation is promised in the near future. This is obviously in answer to the requirement or the desire for people to have an understanding of when they can demobilize, rather than being contracted to the armed forces forever after signing up, and then it turns out that you can never get out. And this is something that Fedorov's had to deal with. It's a legacy from not having had this dealt with previously. Fedorov, now your young guy in charge of the MOD. He said, last week I worked at the front for several days. I met with the commanders of corps and groups, brigade commanders. We are launching a basic minimum provision of drones to brigades. We're also working on centralized provision to the army with Starlinks and pickup trucks. So each brigade is going to get a minimum amount of drones rather than, the they've got different schemes going on. So the point scheme means that the better units get the better drones, but it's a bit of a virtuous cycle for the good units and then not so good for the worse units, which means it's very difficult for the worse units to get better because they're not picking up the points and they're not getting the equipment, which means they're struggling to get better at so on and so forth. So there's a basic minimum provision of drones to brigades. We're also working on centralized provision of Starlinks and pickup trucks. That's good. There's a loss audit that's taking place. We're starting an analysis of each loss on the battlefield. The audit will help identify key problems and make management decisions for their systematic solution. Human capital is the highest value. So in other words, we just need to make sure we don't lose people unnecessarily going forward. We are changing the approach to forming needs. We have revised the target indicators for drone provision for the year. A procurement plan has been formed, scaling ground drones. The goal is to transfer logistics in order to reduce personnel losses. This is really, really important. So you are now seeing a formalization of this process to replace humans with drones. We've seen this from the drone corridor, that drone line, where you have 15 to 20 kilometers, 10 to 15 kilometers, whatever it is, around a contact line that is an area that's defended by drones, and any movement from the enemy, Russian here in this context, they get taken out by Ukrainian drones. But what you need is that when Russians break through or attack a certain place, that they come across UGVs with machine guns rather than a human being with a machine gun. And when you need to do an evacuation, a medical evacuation, you're using UGVs to do that. And when you're getting supplies to your actual troops on the front line, you need to be doing that by UGV, because each time, if you lose a UGV, you lose a hunk of metal and not a human being. So scaling ground drones is a really important move for the armed forces here. An alternative to Mavics, and we're going to come to this actually, products can be an analog of Mavics using AI. Funnily enough, we've got a bit of news on that very topic. So you're already seeing the impact that Fedorov is having on the MOD. I think this appointment could be an absolutely critical one. Now, a Polish-Ukrainian joint venture, PKMILSA, PKMILSA, is preparing to launch production of the Ukrainian 2S-22 Bogdana 155mm NATO standard self-propelled artillery system in Poland. It's also noted that more than 600 Bogdana systems have already been produced. Apparently, they're producing Bogdana, although I think that's a mixture of the self-propelled and the towed artillery pieces, to the tune of at least 40 a month now. So over one a day. And that I'm hoping that's going to be, more than replacement numbers, or certainly will be helping out there in mitigating losses. So that's excellent news there. These co-productions are really good. Now, Ukrainian company Firepoint released a video showing their latest missile, the FP7. It's a ballistic missile, has a range of 200 kilometers and can carry a payload of 150 kilograms. This is like your ATACMS equivalent to some degree. A tactical ballistic missile won't go as far as the atmosphere, but will have a ballistic trajectory rather like the ATACMS. ATACMS, I think, has 300 kilometer range. This one's 200 kilometer. But it's a ballistic missile that's going to be much harder for the Russians to shoot down. You can happily watch this video while I drink some white port. Oh, you're just watching grey sky. Well done. Brilliant. Well, that's exciting. Anyway, FP7, as sooner they can get these made at scale and to the battlefield, the better. Now, to stay on Firepoint, they're developing a long-range version of the drones with a 105 kilogram warhead based on existing products. So at the moment, the FP2 drone has two variants from what I can work out. It's 100. So the FP1, remember, is the long-range drone that looks rather like that, but it goes, instead of having a heavy warhead, it's the trade-off. You have heavier the warhead, the less fuel you have on board, so the shorter it goes. So the FP1 can go a long way, 1,500 kilometers plus, but it doesn't have a huge warhead. The FP2 goes 200 kilometers and it's got a 105 kilogram warhead, which is really bloody useful. It also comes in a variant that's 60 kilograms, probably just because it's cheaper and you don't need 105 kilograms oftentimes for what it's being used for. So if you're using these FP2 drones to hit like a self-propelled gun, rocket launcher, whatever it is, surface-to-air missile system, actually 105 kilograms is overkill. And so you're wasting resources. So they have the FP2 with the two sizes, but now they're increasing the capacity of the FP1. Does that mean it has to be larger to take more fuel? I don't know. The company is currently working on increasing the range of the FP2 as well. So that's currently has a flight range of 200 kilometers. So they're doing both, expanding the capacity, the payload of the FP1s, and extending the range of the FP2s. Now, Ukrainian interceptor drone makers say they can export 5,000 to 10,000 units monthly. So this is going back to the idea of getting this stuff to Middle East. 5 to 10,000 units monthly without affecting Ukraine's own defense, according to Reuters. Skyfall's P1 Sun costs $1,000 per unit and has downed over 1,500 Shaheds in 4 months. US and Qatar are in talks about purchasing it. Turns out it does have some cards. 5 to 10,000 a month. I mean, wow. That just goes to show you that Ukraine, with a bit more money in the right places, can be producing plenty enough of these interceptor drones. The problem actually probably isn't the production of the drones. It's the number of teams and the radars and other things that are required in order to fire these. It's easy to say just produce more of them. Actually, there's no point producing more if you don't have the people to operate them. Right, Ukraine is producing approximately 200 Shark reconnaissance drones per month. Now, Spec Systems that are making drones in Mildenhall and Suffolk in the UK just started up, reported on that. They are making these as well. I presume that's not included in this manufacturing number. They're producing 200 Shark reconnaissance drones a month. They've got a maximum flight range of over 300 kilometers and can reach the entire area of Crimea within 1 to 2.5 hours, allowing Ukraine to locate Russian air defenses and direct drone strikes. So all those FP2 drones strike hits that you see in Crimea and Zaporizhia, taking out all those things in the way that we love watching on a daily basis, facilitated by these guys doing the legwork. And I think Dimko Zhlutenko, although I think he's coming out of that role now, going to a different role altogether. But Dimko, associated with Jigazpur, the charity that we've been helping a number of times, he, I think, flew Sharks, if I'm right. I know he's a reconnaissance drone unit. I think it was the Sharks that he utilized. Ukraine has developed a twin fuselage drone called the Blitz 2. It's designed to perform a wide range of tasks, according to Militiani there. So that you can see it's, well, looks like a bit of a shit and sticks bit of production there. Cheap and cheerful looking drone. It's multifunctional and can be used for both reconnaissance and strike missions. Maximum speed of the device is up to 160 kilometers an hour. Wow, that's not bad considering it looks about as aerodynamic as a brick. But it's horses for courses. Cheap and cheerful, does a job. That's what you need. And it can still go 160 kilometers an hour. So happy days there. Okay. Then we hear Militiani again reporting on this new Bliskavka drone. I presume that means Flash, because Bliskavka, Flash News renamed itself with the Ukrainian name Bliskavka. I think that means Flash. Anyway, new versions of this can be controlled via Starlink. Ukrainian company Vyry has developed new versions of the Bliskavka drone, which can now use alternative control systems. Working on implementing a guidance system, announced in an interview with Militiani. So in short, everything you can think of is already there. Perhaps not everything has been announced or shown yet, but everything has been tested in combat conditions and works. So the drones can now be controlled using fiber optics. Wow, so a fixed wing with fiber optics there, Starlink satellite communications, and an LTE system with digital video channel. It also has a cruise mode. Work is underway on optional guidance system, which will be able to reliably distinguish military equipment from non-military equipment. So I presume that's a bit of AI thrown in as well. So anyway, all of these kinds of things are being developed all the time by the Ukrainians. And no, this is where we go back to what Fedorov was saying. We're going to be working on analogs of Mavics, so they're not reliant on China. The analog of the Mavic drone, the Slavic, I see what you did there, very clever, will appear in Ukraine, a modified version of the DJI Mavic. Its active development is underway. Engineers have already trained the drone to perform modern military tasks, and next week combat tests of the Slavic will begin. So always working on new stuff. And here we have what looks to be, I need to refresh all my stuff here. We have a cool looking, I'd love to be at this kind of site and see this happening, but we have a kind of not run the gauntlet, but a test of all of these UGVs. So at the end of February, unmanned ground vehicle races were held in Kyiv. A total of 34 teams took part with different drone models. The vehicles had to complete a 10-kilometer course with multiple obstacle sections while carrying a payload equal to half of their declared capacity. I mean, how cool would it be to have like a Robot Wars version of this going on? And just have big UGVs smash each other up. When you see these drones, you don't realize actually how large some of them are. When we were out in Lviv, we Max, our fixer, was sat on top of one of these driving around, and that was an impressive drone. That was. So these all having, I guess, a race around an obstacle course. Sounds like pretty good fun to me. Anyway, again, this goes back to the idea that Fedorov was talking about. We need to have scale up the production of UGVs, and you are getting a whole load of different producers of UGVs now competing with each other, innovating. That's that kind of free market style competition, which means you should get, you know, cheaper and more effective drones for the armed forces to be able to utilize. I mean, so many different types here. Quite fun, quite interesting to see them all, actually. So those, I think a video like that really reflects the focus on UGVs as replacing humans. Now, speaking of which, Ukrainian ground robotic system Droid TW762 is armed with a FN MAG machine gun and uses automatic target acquisition to engage and shoot down FPV drones. This is, I showed you this in a hits and losses video recently. This is really, I think, important to have a UGV that you can just say, right, although it's dependent on being, I guess, charged up, but I don't know how long these things can sit on standby. Let's go and drive this out somewhere into the field and into a crucial place in the contact zone, and just have it shooting down drones in the air. It reminds me of, and I've used this example before. Anyone that's been very carefully listening to my videos might know what I'm going to bring up next. I love, one of my favorite movies of all time is the action film. It's a sequel to Aliens, the James Cameron sequel. And the director's cut to Aliens has these gun turrets that just sit in the corridors of this of the mining base where all the aliens are infesting, and they're just acquiring the targets and automatically shooting at them. And you're thinking it's really tense, you think they're going to run out of bullets, and they just get to like the last 5 bullets left, and then they kill all the aliens that are coming up. And I always think about that film and those scenes when thinking about autonomous target acquisition and the shooting of stuff by drones. Anyway, there you go. That's pretty cool. Hope you guys are all right. Jompy saying, oh no, just working out what you're saying in the live chat, seeing if there's anything going on. Right. Okay. So really cool that you're getting this kind of capability from the Ukrainians here, particularly in the UGV domain. A Ukrainian company, Temeland, has introduced a ground-based drone system, the Grom ND, capable of launching FPV drones. We've seen something like this before, but actually, and we've seen the Russians with this as well, but I've not seen them be utilized. And I guess you've got the benefit here of being able to drive your drone here, your UGV, say, for example, 10 kilometers, and then from that, you can take off an FPV fiber optic drone that has a further, say, 20-kilometer spool. So you can extend the range of an FPV drone by using this as a repeater, whether it be fiber optic or analog. And that means that, you know, with a fiber optic drone, again, you've got the trade-off: the bigger the spool, the less payload you can have on it for explosives. So if you can use a UGV to bump up a further 10 kilometers of range, then you can have a smaller spool and more of a payload. So there's an advantage there. And another one here, this is a Ukrainian mine layer capable of laying 20 10-kilogram TN62 anti-tank mines at one time. We've seen a number of these mine layer type drones before. Oh, I've just blasted my ears with bad music. Here is one looking pretty cool. There's a lot of PR oftentimes goes into these. Sometimes other drones, they look like they've been knocked up in the backyard, and it's about needs must. Okay. Right, moving on. U-Force, maker of the Magura Sea drones, released a test footage from Odessa showing interceptors that auto-launch when a target is detected and then get controlled remotely from hundreds of kilometers away. So this is going back to sort of seeing UGVs have drones taking off from them. We have seen drones take off from sea drones previously. Like, we know that's a thing. Getting close to, say, Novorossiysk and having them. But this is a slight difference here, that it ought. So the problem with the Magura V5 drones is that they oftentimes get shot down or blown up by helicopters. Helicopters can see these drones, and even if they've got like a man pad on a drone, sometimes they have that, then the helicopter will have a longer range than the man pad. So you can take out these Magura V5. So if you're developing or evolving the development of these drones, then you've got to be thinking about, how can we stop these from getting blown up before they get to Novorossiysk? And one way of doing it is by having autonomous target acquisition that then sends up a drone and probably alerts your controller back at base, that then goes, right, I'm going to control this drone that's been automatically sent up, and I'm going to go and attack the helicopter or whatever it is. So that's pretty cool. Auto launch when a target is detected and then gets controlled remotely. Now, it could also be not an aerial target, but actually you might want to not lose the Magura V5, an expensive sea drone. You can have a cheaper aerial drone on top. The sea drone detects a boat in the distance or a ship in the distance, and then you can send up a drone to go and hammer at the boat or the ship. So there is that. So yeah, that's pretty cool. It's an unknown modification with interceptor drones and other things. Footage shows a container opening on a naval drone from which an unknown interceptor takes off. Okay, so there is that. And actually, so no, the other application is probably actually the primary application, is having these things float out in the Black Sea on the way to Odessa. So Odessa gets routinely hammered by Shaheds. So if you've got that looks like a bog standard interceptor drone, obviously not bog standard, these things are decent bits of kit, but I assume then that these things get sent out to the Black Sea, hang around on standby, and then as soon as a Shahed goes across, it automatically sends out the interceptor, and then you can go and take it out. So that's far more likely what these are for. So I've just changed what I said. Yeah, that's what happens when I'm just spitballing. Okay, Ukrainian company Odd Systems plans to build a new facility for the mass production of thermal imaging sensor components with a projected output of at least 1 million sensors per year. According to co-founder Yaroslav Azhniuk, the goal is to significantly reduce Ukrainian manufacturers' dependence on foreign components, including those produced in China. Azhniuk explained that Europe currently produces about 500,000 such sensors annually, a volume that would meet Ukraine's needs for only about 5 months. Wow. So Ukraine needs 500,000 sensors every 5 months. So 1 million a year would give them sensors for not an entire year, 10 months of the year. China has raised fiber optic prices 3 to 5 times, disrupting FPV drone production in both Ukraine and Russia. Ukraine reports shortages, with some manufacturers halting orders. Russia is entirely dependent on Chinese supplies. I think this is partly to do with data centers needing fiber optic cabling and being willing to pay more than people wanting to build drones to blow each other up. Data centers, yeah, we're a multi-gajillion dollar company. We need to build huge data centers for AI. So we're going to outpay you whatever you're paying, whatever you're receiving from some 2-bit drone manufacturer in the middle of Russia, or some, charity in Ukraine building drones. Don't care. We're gonna buy that fiber optic for 5 times that because we need it for our data centers. Chinese like, yeah, we'll take the money. You're gonna pay for it. And of course, that then really makes things much more difficult for the Ukrainians and Russians, who then have to get together even more money to manufacture these drones. Now, Ukraine is still buying the majority of its drone motors from China, but homegrown manufacturer Motor G is closing the gap, scaling from 181 units to 200,000 units per month in its first year of production. Now, remember, I presume you're going to need 4 motors per quadcopter. So, don't think that's making motors for 200,000 drones. The origin story has a twist. The company paid Chinese manufacturers $10,000 for production documents and technology to get started, essentially buying the playbook from the very supply chain Ukraine is now racing to replace. As Defender Media reports, Motor G now claims roughly 17% of the domestic market, with all other Ukrainian manufacturers combined at about 10% and China still dominating the rest. The company's goal is to push its market share to 20 to 30% this year while expanding into European and American markets, turning wartime import substitution into an export business. Good stuff there. Right, we've just got a few more bits and pieces on Russia, but thank you for being so patient with me. I'm amazed that there's this many people on a Saturday night or whatever time it is for you, willing to listen to this. But anyway, what do you guys have to say? Most countries, says Matty B from Australia, most countries in Europe are entrepreneurially helping produce good stuff for the Ukrainian war effort. Thank you, Europe. Indeed. Indeed. So the drone in Cyprus was a Grand 2 drone with a Russian sat-nav Mark IV, something which is obsolete in Ukraine, the Cometer. We're going to come on to that a little bit later, Paul, but thank you for that. What else do we have? I'm not going to go through every single one of the ones that Benny has pulled up because I'm doing too much talking. The pirate says, of course, defenses and insurance. So now peeps should not be surprised that the premium is going up. Yeah. The more you need it, the more it costs, or the more you use it, the more it costs. Yes. Pirate says, so ATP, the rest of the world is not following the rules of war. So where do you think we are heading on this? Is the Geneva Convention dead? The problem is, to compete with other nations in war that are breaking the rules, you have to break the rules. But if you break the rules, then there are no rules, and then it's a race to the bottom, and society and the world is all the worse off for it. We need to stick to the moral high ground. You cannot, I think, Ukraine shouldn't be committing war crimes, shouldn't be, indiscriminately throwing, if there's an advantage to committing war crimes, you can cook up whatever rationale there might be, but there might be some kind of advantage to committing war crimes in a strictly kind of military sense, or whatever your metrics of success are. But Ukraine just can't do that. Russia has an advantage, and they can do what they like whenever they want, and it doesn't really make a difference to them. They commit a war crime, not commit a war crime, do whatever. Whereas Ukraine is constrained and has that kind of disadvantage of being constrained. But the advantage is they aren't complete bastards, and they are adhering to international rules of war, which is decent, and also it's useful because if they didn't, they probably wouldn't get aid from Europe and elsewhere. But we need to keep the moral high ground, and that's why we need to say no to the United States striking on Iran in the way it is, even though you might not like Iran. Like, I don't like the Iranian regime, it's diabolical, but also I don't want to break the law in dealing with them, because then it's just the law of the jungle. But that's how you get to World War II. And what happened after World War II is we started thinking really deeply about how the world should be organized in a way that we all had rules of existence, and that's worked fairly well. Although you can argue that the US has had a long history of kind of bending the rules to suit them in terms of international conquest and so on and so forth. But yeah, I just think it's not looking good at the moment. But if we all give up on that, then yeah, I think I think you're welcoming in a new era of, I don't know, it's of dystopia almost. Michel Deval gifting 5 ATP. So, talk about Deval here. I hope Michel is the correct way of pronouncing your name there. Franz Deval is an absolutely magnificent primatologist. Has he died recently? I hope he hasn't. Franz Deval is honestly, some of the work he's done on primatology is magnificent. Not that that's necessarily got anything to do with you other than the same surname, but yeah, I advise you read some of his books, go and see some of the videos. Stuff to do with bonobos and anger from injustice. So I in my days of philosophy, when you're talking about, you know, where we get justice from, and if you don't believe in a god, and you know, you think you're trying to understand evolution, how the role evolution plays in how we are what we are and how we operate in our behaviors, and you're thinking, well, you know, sometimes we have like human exceptionalism where we think, well, we've got all these characteristics and no other animal has them, but actually you find elements of all our characteristics in the animal kingdom. And things like anger at injustice is really interesting. So Franny Duval did this experiment where you get these two bonobos, and one bonobo has both bonobos have these tokens, and when they give a token out of the cage, they then get, you know, a grape in return, and they really like grapes, and that's really nice. And so, you know, give a token, get a grape, and then in these cages next to each other, and they can look in and see each other. And then you start giving one of the bonobos cucumber instead of grapes, and they don't really like cucumber. Grapes are much nicer, they're sweeter, they're sugary, and that sucks. So you then start giving the bonobos, one of them you give grapes and the other one you give cucumber at the same time they're giving you tokens. And this ape's looking at the other one saying, hang on, it's getting grapes and I'm getting cucumber. And then it starts getting really angry. It starts going mental at the cage, and that the person saying, stop giving me cucumber when you're giving him grapes, and getting not angry that he's getting, like, if the other bonobo wasn't there, it would be like less of a problem. But it's the idea that that bonobo is getting grapes and you are giving me cucumber, and that is unfair. So there's a sense of fairness. So just doing experiments like that give us an understanding that there is like these higher abstract ideas that exist in the animal kingdom outside the humans. Anyway, it's just a random aside there, just thinking about the surname of the Vault. So sorry, not sorry, but anyway, that's the way I roll. Mark Bizq, thanks for all the brilliant live streams lately towards some weekend Ukrainian one. So I have just, as I said earlier, had half a bottle a full bottle with my partner, half a bottle myself of Ukrainian sparkling wine that I got from Mark from the little whiskey shop. So thank you very much, and it was lovely. I'm trying to support Ukraine in that. So thank you, Mark. I appreciate that, and I appreciate you. Right, let's get back to the. Scruffy, thank you for bringing it back to the topic at hand. Higher abstract ideas exist in bonobos, but not Russians. Oh, ouch. Maybe laugh. Thanks, Scruffy. Right, so we're now on to the final stretch, the home straight. Guys, honestly, I'll let you go soon. So we just seeing so much to talk about in what you're saying. I'm going to keep it to the task at hand. So this is now on to what Russia is doing. Russia plans to increase the contingent in Ukraine to 800,000 soldiers by the end of the year, according to Sirski. I said this in a hits and losses the other day. During 2026, the Kremlin wants to recruit more than 400,000 contract soldiers, Commander-in-Chief said. So the Ukraine has no other choice but to continue to fight and destroy the enemy. I mean, yeah, I'm interested in how they're going to achieve this, so they can have the goal of doing that. Like they've got the goal of militarily taking over the Donbass. Yeah, brilliant. Are you going to be able to do that? Well, not if the Ukrainians have anything to do with it. And same with recruiting. Like, where are you going to get these from? How are you going to change things to get that many more, considering the moment you're losing more than you are recruiting? And as I said again the other day, the leaked documents indicate that the Russian MOD intends to recruit nearly 80,000 people for its new drone force, many of whom will be recruited from Russia's student population. Over 200 Russian universities are currently undertaking an intensive recruitment drive. So the stats here for the 80,000, by 2026, the unmanned systems forces are planned to comprise 7 separate brigades, 15 regiments, 70 battalions, 1 division, 12 Rubicon detachments, 12 heavy drone companies, 12 ground robotic systems companies, with a total strength of 78,800 personnel. To staff them, it's necessary to conduct a targeted recruitment of 8,100 officers, 6,400 warrant officers, and 64,300 sergeants and soldiers. To fill those positions, you need conscripts. They're looking at 10,800 conscripts, contract military personnel participating in the special military operation and serving in other branches, 10,000. So 10,000 of which will already be soldiers nicked from other areas, volunteers from the reserves, citizens, 58,000 people in the reserve, including those who have completed training, blah, 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 those who have served in military aviation units, students from military training centers, and then on top of all that, students of civilian and higher and secondary vocational educational institutions, female citizens as well, who have appropriate education, so on and so forth. So again, though, okay, brilliant. Is that doable? Can you do that? Can you get that many people? I mean, that's that. If you can get 800,000 people by the end of this year, and then develop 80,000 people for your drone forces by 2026. So I presume that's by the end of this year. That is a massive challenge for Ukraine. The question is, well, what's the reality there? Now, as mentioned by Paul Guber-Deveritz earlier, the Russian components have been found in the drone attacking the UK base in Cyprus, unconfirmed by officials, but it does seem to, that's an Irish manufacturer, but it produces stuff for the, if he zooms out in a second, this is the Cometer, there you see Cometer. If true, the Cometer M use signals deeper, deeper Russia-Iran cooperation in navigation and electronic warfare. We just don't know where that's coming from, though. To be honest, could be Lebanon, could be the Russians themselves. There's even some theories that Israel has been sending stuff into different countries to try and get them to be angry with Iran and join in attacking Iran. Russia has begun to use a new subsonic cruise missile, the Isdali-30, against Ukraine. Ukraine's defense intelligence has said it's got a range of up to 1,500 kilometers, 800 kilogram warheads. So that's a big old missile there. Speed of 600 to 800 kilometers an hour, and it's electronic warfare resistant using satellite navigation. That is a real issue. It's a worry if they're going to be using that at scale. I've not seen that reported. I wonder if we'll see that reported on those blue infographics that the Ukrainians produce every day. I had a right old pop at Trent Zelenko the other day. He was being ridiculous. He was slagging off our present government. He didn't. He slagged off Starmer for there not being enough naval ships. Like, it's this whole idea is like the guy's been prime minister for 14 months or whatever it is, or I don't know how long, maybe longer than that, 18 months, and you're slagging him off for not having built like 20 warships in like 18 months. Like, but he's really ideological, Trent Zelenko, and sometimes he really, really irritates the heck out of me. Anyway, here he's talking about, well, Ilya Ponomarenko, the Ukrainian, says, is this a coincidence that we in Ukraine are having a sharp decrease in the number of Russian Shahed attacks these days? This is why, and Benny Pie is hopefully onto this using AI, this is why I want to see. So on a daily basis, my hits and losses video, I have the green sheet that gives you the data that the general staff release of hits and losses, losses every day for the Russians. And then the Air Force bring out the blue one that tells you the drones intercepted and missiles intercepted overnight. But that is a subset. It's nested within the green sheet, which has everything that's taken place over 24 hours for drones intercepted. and missiles intercepted. And then the blue one is like only overnight. What I want to see is just as well as that, and thanks to Dell for helping out with all the every day, give me the data there and the graphs, the graphical presentation of all that data over the course of the war. But we're working on, and when I say we, I mean Benny is working on that blue infographic, so we can see. Sometimes I get a sense that the big attacks, like last night, 509 drones and missiles sent, they are getting more spaced out. That actually the Russians are potentially struggling to make as many drones as they were previously. And that's what Ponomarenko is talking about. Is this a coincidence that we are in Ukraine having a sharp decrease in the number of Russian Shahed attacks these days? I mean, it's very noticeable. Same goes on with the Russian massive missile attacks. So that, I think, is more I think both of them are perfectly explicable. The missile attacks, I think it's not so much to do with the production, though. Two different things. For the missiles, they're probably producing similar numbers of missiles, but they don't have the launchers, so they do more frequent, lower numbers of missiles sent into Ukraine. They aren't able to use a Black Sea Fleet to fire caliber cruise missiles, or they don't want to because it's too risky. And the Operation Spiderweb took out a lot of the long-range strategic bombers, so they have to do more sorties regularly with fewer missiles. But for the drones, I think they're not producing as many as they were. They did want to get up to 1,000 drones a day, and they are producing clearly. Well, the last average I saw was they're sending about 181 a day, which is a lot of drones, but it's not where they were, and it's not where they thought they would be. So there are two reasons. One is taking out the production of drones. One is taking out the ability for the Russians to fire missiles. Now, Trentelenko says the reality was the Russian Garand supply chain shared many, many components with Iran's Shahed supply chain, and both were using the UAE to buy and smuggle Garand and Shahed electronics from the West. Iran has stopped the Garand Shahed supply chain by attacking the UAE, is his theory. So actually, it's not about Ukraine striking the production chain within Russia so much as Iran's messing around with the UAE. But that would really be only the last week, though. So, I don't know about that. Okay. Right. I am going to, what am I going to do? I am going to draw this to hopefully a satisfactory conclusion. I'm just going to see if we've got any more news about what's blown up tonight. If anything, no, just Zaporizhia is being targeted at the moment. Lots of stuff on Iran. Naval base in, oh no, that's Iran. Yeah, so it's all on Iran at the moment. Trump, in case you didn't know, Trump slagged off the UK again. Before we get to some of your comments, the United Kingdom, our once great ally, so we're no longer a great ally of the United States, maybe the greatest of them all, is finally giving serious thought to sending 2 aircraft carriers to the Middle East. That's okay, Prime Minister Starmer. We don't need them any longer, but we will remember we don't need people that join wars after we've already won. President Donald J. Trump. So slagging off the UK for not jumping on the bandwagon and attacking Iran when we were asked to by the United States, even though they gave us no warning, no details, and there's no plan. But we still have to jump when we still have to say how high when you say jump. Okay, that is enough from me. Thank you very much to all of you. I really do appreciate you. Just a couple from the pirate here. How should the rest of the world understand the Geneva Convention when Russia and the US don't follow the rules? Is it then not a convention? Well, herein lies the problem. I've talked to you before about the free rider scenario. So the idea is you have, an honesty box to put your, £1 coin in whenever you take a donut from, I don't know, you're at the bar. There's a plate of donuts, £1. You can take a donut. It's an honesty box. And what happens is free riders will come along and say, hey, I'm going to take a donut and I'm not going to put £1 in the honesty box. And at some point, So that's factored into how you price it at £1. Actually, the donuts are only costing this much, and I think there's going to be a plate of 10, 2 are going to be nicked, 8 will be paid for, so we'll price them at this £1 a donut. The problem is, at some point, if there are too many free riders, then the whole system falls down, and you're not making any money on the donuts, because it turns out that 7 people are nicking them, and you're only getting £3, and that doesn't cover the cost of making a donut. So it all falls apart. So with a free rider situation, there's going to be some kind of limit where there are too many free riders, and that then the system breaks down, and no one benefits. Now, with international law, you can probably get away with like Russia not adhering to international law. But if the US join in, and there's such an important big country with that many people and that many conflicts, then that's the system breaking down. Does the system break down if the US and if China then go, well, they've broken the rules, so we're going to now just invade Taiwan, and there's nothing you can do about it because the US did it and they got away with it. So this is a really, really, I mean, this is why I spend a lot of time talking about this, because I think we're starting to test whether we've got to that kind of free rider limit. Are there enough people not adhering to the rules, not being honest enough, with their paying for their donuts? I don't know if that's a good analogy, but that's the one I can think of here. And I think it works. So when does it not become a convention? When does it all fall apart? And I'm just, this is why I'm banking on Europe to just be a beacon for democracy and fairness in the world now that is looking more, and Australia and Canada and Japan and South Korea and New Zealand, these other nations as well. But Europe seems to me to be a significant enough block of countries that can challenge China. It can challenge the United States. And the thing about nations like China is that the moment they are serious economy, it's a serious economy. And if the world starts not paying attention to rules and it turns to complete chaos, then actually the economies break down and supply chains break down. So for example, if it's like that's illegal, we can't have that, so we stop pirates doing stuff in the Red Sea area, and Suez Canal can operate, and this can operate. Basically, economies need stability, predictability, i.e. the rule of law. So the US will soon learn that if it keeps breaking the law, and then either people then eschew the US, or like society breaks down, then all their economy will break down, and it's just chaos. And if we want donuts, we need to be honestly putting £1 in the donut box, right? Otherwise it's all freaking chaos and everyone's helping themselves, and it's just, it all falls apart. So, and that includes, it has an effect on things. It's not just abstract ideas of war and law, it's the economy and what we can buy and what we can afford, and so on and so forth. And the pirate then says, as a Norwegian, I'm thankful for living in a part of the world that values life. Sad that Russia does not have these values. The US is also moving in that direction, in the direction of Russia, he says. I hope not. I hope there's enough correction within the system of the US, but it's going to come down to the midterms. But then will Trump cheat over the midterms? It's going to come down to how the Supreme Court, the problem is the Supreme Court is to some degree beholden to Trump, with a 6-3 conservative majority. But the sorts of conservatives you've got there are, people like Clarence Thomas and Justice Alito, who are just batshit crazy, and it's a real problem. Come back to the EU, please. And bring your Commonwealth with you so we can rule the seas. Oh, you're making me sad, Ronnie. Yes, so thank you to all of you. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share. As Ronnie said, oh no, I just want to say something, Ronnie. Thank you as well. I said this the other day in a comment to you. Thank you for your support of the channel and for always being awesome in the live chat, and for just being just brilliant. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. Benny kind of pointed that out, and I was like, yeah, God damn it, Ronnie is a ledge. So thank you. Kevin Devane, my Irish friend here, says, I encourage everyone to watch or rewatch V for Vendetta, Life Imitating Art. Kevin, this is we are, I think to some degree, many of us here are birds of a feather. I've been thinking for about 6 months, I really should watch V for Vendetta again, because I think it's probably going to speak a lot more to me than when I watched it 20 years ago, whenever it came out. That's one of the films I keep thinking I should watch that again. Yeah. So yeah, well said. Right. Okay. I keep promising to go and failing to go. So thank you, everybody. You're all wonderful. I need to go and get myself some donuts, don't I? Enough with the donuts, but at least he spelt it correctly, so there is that. Oh my God, it's Dave. Dave's my mate from down the road. All right, Dave, it's good to speak to you again. Like, rugby today was horrific, dude. Let's go and have a beer. Let's have a beer this week, Dave. I'm formally inviting you down to my local to have a beer. So hopefully I'll feed back to you whether Dave and I had a beer and what we talked about and how much of the world we solved. You guys are all welcome, but I'm not telling you where we are due to OPSEC. Don't want the FSB turning up. So anyway, I'll see you at the pub this week, guys, but mainly Dave. Thank you all for your awesomeness. Toodle pips, and I will speak to you soon. And custard donuts, always jam donuts, not the ones with the holes. The jam donut, that's what you want. And always eat it from the whole end first, because that's where they put the jam in. And so if it's going to come out from anywhere, it's going to come out from there. So you always eat it from there first. Everyone knows this. Take care. Bye.